Hey guys. Well, first of all, I definitely want to apologize for the fact that I've just not been keeping in touch. Haven't called anybody, haven't messaged anybody. I did try to throw some encouragement your way on our Facebook page, which I know not everybody is able to access that, just to remind you that I haven't forgotten about anybody. But I think a lot of us are in a process where we're trying to deal with this isolation that we're going through right now. Mike's sermon this morning about the blessing of going through tribulation really did kind of hit home with what it is we're doing right now. I've realized after basically 2 weeks of being able to do nothing more than go to work and come home of just how important fellowship really is to my well-being. An extrovert like myself, this is not very comfortable. I require that human interaction, and being with you all is part of that interaction that I enjoy. And it looks like this problem is going to continue longer than maybe we anticipated. I know the entire month of March was put on hold, but here we are last Sunday of March, and we still got case numbers going up and things of that nature. But the good news of it is, people are recovering from this. They are. The numbers are simply letting us know of who is afflicted. Thankfully, the number of those who are afflicted and the number of people who have died from it are not the same. And I wish they would spend more time talking about that rather than just talking about the number of cases. But our media has its own way of doing things. But I didn't come to talk to you about that problem today. We all know what that problem is. I'm sitting here in the comfort of my own home, blessed to have this home over my head. All of us do. A place to call home and a place to set up shop until all this stuff is just done and over with. But as I said before, I really haven't been doing the duty that I should be doing and keeping in touch. Yes, I get it. We are doing the social distancing for a reason. I get that the last time we all got together, there were no hugs and handshakes. It was words and things of that nature, which is very different for us. But here I've been away from that fellowship for 2 weeks, and I've noticed it's starting to get to me a little bit. But I also had to remind myself, well, what have I done to check on other people? I've checked on my grandparents and my family, of course, but it's a shame that I've not been checking on my big family either. I've talked to Hazel a few times to make sure she's okay, but one of the things I wanted us to foster in this group that we do is this sense of camaraderie, where we genuinely are interested in each other's well-being. Which kind of leads me to what I want to look at. One of the closest friendships that we read about in the Old Testament was between David and Jonathan. And it was a friendship that very much seemed signed, sealed, and delivered, so to speak. The way they talked to each other, the way they lifted each other up. The fact that even though Jonathan was the son of Saul, he was more than willing to watch David ascend to the throne because he knew what his father was doing. He knew his father had failed his mission to be king. Even God himself said, "You've not done what you're supposed to do." And David's the one that fought off Goliath in this war with the Philistines. It wasn't Saul and his army. It was just David himself. Therefore, God sees that and looks to reward this boy who would become probably one of the best kings that Israel had, despite all of his troubles. But you'll notice in 1 Samuel chapter 20, we see that Saul, his anger against David has been kindled and brought to a head. He wants to kill him. David has stolen Saul's fire. Saul doesn't look like the great king that he's supposed to because David was doing more things than he was. David's faith in God was solid. Saul did very little. In fact, Saul did things that God specifically told him not to do. But Here is the son of the king and this boy who will become king, and their friendship is very much solid. In chapter 20, beginning in verse 41, Jonathan knew that his father was wanting to kill David, and he knew that David had to get out of there. So it says in verse 41, as soon as the lad had gone, which is Jonathan, David arose from a place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed down 3 times. And they kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, may the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever. So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. They had to leave one another now. Jonathan knew that Saul was coming so close to killing David. Saul had even threatened Jonathan himself because Jonathan supported David. He knew what was happening. They both came together. They wept with one another. It even says they kissed one another. Now, one side note here, a lot of people would make the assumption that this particular verse supports the idea that David and Jonathan were in a homosexual relationship. Well, number one, that is not true. This is the only instance where we see the two of them treating each other in this respect. And next, kissing people was a form of affection. It was a form of greeting for Jewish people. Whether you were kissing a man, a woman, a child, it didn't matter. It was very similar. In Europe, they do the same thing today. In places like France, greeting each other, whether you're the same sex or not, with a kiss is just like our version of a handshake or a hug. It was no different from here. So this has nothing to do with a homosexual relationship. It has to do with a very close friendship. One where the two of them were linked to each other. They even made a promise before God that their descendants would have this bond. This is the kind of friendship that I was hoping that we will develop. The fact that they had to separate for the time being. They weren't separated for too long. There was a time when Jonathan would go and aid David when he knew where he was, take him things, and offer his guiding hand. Mind you, Jonathan would eventually die alongside his father in war, but at the same time, his loyalty to David did not waver. One of the things I hope for us is that our loyalty to each other does not waver, especially right now. In fact, I would say right now, we probably have one of the best circumstances to spread the gospel, to assure people that just because this disease is plaguing our nation, there's still something better going on anyway. God is still in control of the entire matter. He's still the one that is watching over and aiding us. God is the one helping those who are sick to recover. Yes, people have died. Disease kills people. It's something that's happened since day one. Yes, God could have prevented it, but that's not the point. One of the things that's very dangerous right now, I think, for everybody is the isolation can create an atmosphere where we feel like we are completely and totally alone. And that's not what we are. You're never alone. Not with a God who is there and everywhere, but the beauty of living in today is that technology affords us this. We can still fellowship outside of the church building. In fact, I saw a post not too long ago that said, now is a great time to reiterate to the world that the church is not a building. It's people. It's the people, the called out, as the Bible says. So our church buildings, as wonderful as they are, they're not the church. That's us. We are a whole body with many members. The Apostle Paul was away from brethren for a long time, and in a few of his letters he would even write, I long to be with you. I know that I do. especially right now. Because some things in life haven't slowed down. For me, school's still going on. I'm considered essential personnel because I work in the healthcare industry, although for safety's sake, I'm going to be working from home this week. But I also have a responsibility to you all, to the whole congregation, to every Christian. But part of us helping one another is going through something like this and reminding each other, hey, I haven't forgotten about you. Are you okay? Are your children okay? How are you coping with this new lifestyle that 2 weeks ago was not even here? Life felt normal when the month of March began, and it's about to end on a very abnormal note. Lots of things are going on, but it's nothing to fear, especially when you have brethren that are there for you. It really does remind you that no matter what is happening, you're still important. People are still praying for you. People are still concerned about you and are not getting hyped up with all of the messages that we are getting from everybody about this idea that we're going through an apocalyptic type time period. We're not. Some would even say that this disease is a sign of the end times, or this is a sign of the fact that, God is bringing America into judgment. There's no biblical support for that. There's not. Because if that's what was happening, then we would have to discredit a lot of stuff we read about in Scripture. But back to the point. David and Jonathan had a bond that lasted the entire time. Jonathan would die quicker than David. But David and Jonathan's friendship did not waver. Even when Jonathan, who was Saul's son, had more loyalty to David than his own father. Saul could have killed Jonathan. Saul wanted to kill David. They knew this, and that is why they separated for the time being. But that separation did not cause the friendship to end. I hope this doesn't do the same thing for us. I'm hoping to do something like this daily as a way to encourage you guys, as a way to remind you that you're still on my mind, and I'm still thinking about us and the things that we can get to do. Super Saturday had to be postponed. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Doesn't mean that we still don't have great things that we can do before this year is over with. It's only March. The end of the year is not close yet whatsoever. We've just started a new season. It's just begun. So I encourage you guys to keep an eye on each other. I'm certainly appreciative for anybody who's asking me how I am, things of that nature. I will definitely try harder to be more there for you all. By all means, if you're struggling with this, don't be afraid to call me and get a hold of me. We'll talk. We'll sit down. We'll hash this stuff out. We'll remind each other that we're okay, even though things don't appear okay every time you turn on the TV. So just like David and Jonathan, I hope that we will have a bond that is unwavering and that it will be unbreakable no matter what the circumstances are. And those are my words from the couch.